Hey everyone, welcome to Arne's Question Corner. This is where we answer a question that you've asked us. And if you want to ask a question, just all you got to do is put the question in the comments down below or email us at info@customsmanager.org and you will see the answer to your question in a video like this. So today we received a question that asks, how do I know if my product that I would like to export from the UK requires an export control license? Before we get into answering these questions, please subscribe to the channel. Please click on the like button. That way, you'll never miss a video like this again, and it would really help us out. So, export controls in the United Kingdom. Now, export controls have a statutory instrument in the UK, and that is called the Export Control Order 2008. And everything centers around this legislation. And in this legislation, in the Export Control Order 2008, it is written that there will be a UK strategic control list, and that serves as a foundation of determining whether a product, software, or technology that you may want to export is controlled or not, and therefore requires an export license. So if your items that you want to export are referenced under these control lists, in the UK, we call it a rating rather than a classification, then you must apply for a license with the ECJU, the Export Control Joint Unit. It's a government department of the Department of International Trade, and it is the sole authority for granting export licensing for strategic goods. Now, I should mention that in my response, I will cover only the provisions for how do you determine if you have a rating within these strategic lists. There are other controls that might be in place, or other laws that might be in place, for example, sanctions laws. There are also parts related to end user and destination controls that I'm not going to cover. I'm going to focus clearly on how do you determine if a product is listed on these strategic goods lists. Now, obviously, the first thing you might want to do is you want to determine what the product actually is. For this, you might look at product lists, you might look at descriptions, you might look at commercial information, you might look at marketing information, you might download some brochures, you might have conversations with the technical expert in order to really determine what the characteristics of this product are. So it's probably no use to call something a machine, because that's very generic, but a specific machine that does certain things, that has the following function, that has the following characteristics, that might already be interesting and useful. You might add some technical parameters that might be really relevant for determining your export control licensing. So the first thing you then want to check in the UK is the so-called goods checker. In the UK, we have this website, a goods checker and OGL checker, and this is where you check if your items are controlled and can be identified in these lists, and whether you can get a rating. So you wanted to find out what the keywords are that you need to put into that list. So again, machine is too generic, but the specific characteristics, you've established a list of keywords that really describe your product. You can put them into this goods checker website and then get an answer. And if you get a hit, well, then you have a licensing requirement. And if you don't, then you may determine that that's enough for you to check, or you may just carry out some additional checks, depending on your level of confidence that this is a licensable or not for the specific lists that you're controlling. Again, I'm not talking about end user or other sanctions of legislation that might apply. So you might want to do this without the goods checker, and in a second form, you can do a manual list check. So you go to the strategic lists. It's called the Consolidated List of Strategic Military and Dual Use Items that require export authorization. So you put that into Google, download this entire list, and then you go through it, you read it. A bit of understanding of how it's set up and how you get to these export control numbers would be useful. So you will understand that these export control numbers that determine the rating have an alphanumerical structure. So they will have some numbers and they will have some letters. And so a little bit of export control training on how they're made up of these lists would be quite useful. So if you want more information on that, then please come and speak to me, because we offer training on US, EU, and Chinese export controls regularly. So you want to then go through that list and try to see if you find this item that you're about to export on that list. So you will have done that already with the goods checker, but it is good to verify again that you're not caught by any of these lists. The third thing you can then do is check whether there are international regimes that, well, there are definitely international export control regimes that have their own list. So if appropriate, you might want to check these out. Now, this is a little bit further afield, so you might not need to do that, because the assumption is that the lists already contain these international regime, but it might be useful for context to understand why something is actually listed and controlled. And the fourth tip I can give you, but what we do, so we do these 3 checks. We would do the goods checker, we would do the manual verification, we would control with international regimes. And then the first thing that we would do is we would ask for the commodity code. And if you've determined the commodity code correctly, and again, there's classification training you can check out with us, then you are able to use the so-called correlation table. And that is a verification between the export control classification number rating and the combined nomenclature code if you're in the EU, or the UK tariff commodity code if you're in the UK, in the UK, sorry. So if you're in the UK, you might have to rely on this EU correlation table. And that is okay, because the commodity codes are only listed to, I think the first, or the key ones are listed to the first 4 digits. And you can kind of, since the UK tariff and the EU common tariff are not that far apart, it is a useful guide. It is not law, but it is a useful guide to guide you in which direction you should look on the export control lists. And if you've done all of these 4 checks and you haven't found that your keywords, provided your keywords are sufficiently robust and sufficiently describe the product, and you haven't found your items listed, mentioned in any shape or form in this list, then you can reasonably assume that they wouldn't be caught by these export control lists, and therefore, from a point of view of these lists, would not necessarily require a license. Of course, as I've said, there are other reasons as to why you may need a license, end user destination controls. And of course, if in doubt, remember that this video is not law, it is not even guidance, it is just a few thoughts on the methodology that we use in order to help clients to determine whether their goods are listed on the export control lists or not. And we do that with the EU, with the UK, with the US, with any other lists, right? That's usually the strategy that we would apply. But again, there are variances, there are differences according to depending on the product that you use and the product on the destination that you use. And of course, if you're not sure, there is always the opportunity to ask the government yourself. So in the UK, we have a system called SPIRE. That's the old system we're using currently, and at the time of this recording. And you can ask for a license rating determination, and that doesn't actually cost anything. That's pretty good. So you might want to consider that. All right, I hope I've answered the question. That's how I approach getting an export control license. Thank you for the question. And if you have other questions regarding customs, regarding export controls, sanctions, biosecurity and veterinary affairs, excise, VAT, or global trade in general, why don't you give it a try? Send us a message, info@customsmanager.org, or leave a comment down below. But by all means, if you like this video, subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss any video ever again. Thank you for listening. See you next time. Can't wait. Bye.